Hello everybody and welcome to a very brief recording I'm making here about my Ecamm Live screen recording workflow. This is primarily tailored to demos and other things that we are just recording the screen. As you can see here, I have Ecamm Live right here on my screen. The first thing I'd like to showcase here is the ability to switch between different windows. One of its best features is the ability to take the current application. So as you can see here, I'm not recording my entire screen, either one of my two giant screens over here. You can see that I'm actually recording this with ScreenFlow because I don't want to use Ecamm to record Ecamm when I'm actually switching out the current application. But if I'm over here, what you're seeing here is my laptop screen, and you can see that Ecamm has the ability to use the current application beautifully zoomed to what will actually be a 1080p output video. Now if I make another window, you'll see that it follows the window that I am using here. You can see that we have multiple windows stacked. I can change the zoom. I could say, hey, I need to show more of this particular window, and I can get the proportions right, and I can also get the zoom exactly right, because it's rare that when I capture something on a high resolution retina screen that I will want it to be quite as zoomed out as the full screen allows, as the full screen kind of forces it to be. I want this text to be larger when it goes down to 1080p. So what you end up doing is zooming it down, making it smaller so that you're zooming into the screen. And when you have multiple windows of the same kind and you're using current application, you're going to need to get them the same size so that they overlap. Otherwise, if you have overlapping windows which are in different parts of the screen, they're actually going to be visible with a plain background. So you can see here that I have multiple windows, and that can be helpful in demos too, where you want to be able to display that you have multiple windows of different types, and you're kind of working between them, and you show the interaction between them without having to show your entire desktop or anything like that. But if I take that, so this is a new window that I've just popped, and as you can see, I need very little editing when I'm working with these things. There's nothing really to edit out or switch. So that's working with a single window of a single type, zoomed in nicely to the size that we want. We can see that I have a new browser tab here. I have a Visual Studio Code, vscode.dev in browser editor here. So this, I could be writing some code or editing some content here. And let's say I have another window behind me which is exactly the same size. It's stacked. You can't see it when I'm in this primary window. I can just use the standard app switching capability. In this case it's Command tilde on macOS, and you can see that I have this very smooth window switching capability. But what if I was looking at some documentation? Let's assume that we had some documentation in our in-private browsing window and I needed to switch to it during my demo. What I would do is switch to the primary window. I can say that I want to stay on this primary window, and instead of following the current application, what I would do is select, in this case, not just Microsoft Edge, but in fact the specific window in Microsoft Edge that I want to keep pinned onto my current view. So when I switch over here, you can't tell, aside from that little shadow in the top window at the top there, in the top bar of the window, that I have switched over to grab some documentation, to pull in some text. I'm not distracting the viewer, and it's another thing that I don't have to edit out later. So now if I go switch back to my primary window, we can see that this also works between different types of applications as well. So if I now go to current application, and I have another window which I've sized similarly, in this case it's Visual Studio Code, so it's not a browser window. So a lot of demos can work fairly well if you're switching between just browser windows, and you go from one browser window to another browser window, and you can kind of keep people in the browser, and you could be sharing that just on a voice call or something like that. But as soon as you go from one app to another, you tend to have to share your entire screen or use something like Ecamm Live or another application like OBS and so forth. But this provides very smooth automatic window switching. So if I pop up VS Code And let's say in this case I want to be pinned to VS Code while I switch to the other window, or this is my home window as I organize other things. I can then say I want to change this to Code Insiders. So my first scene is going to be pinned to scene 1. And let's say I'm on a call and I'm leaving that pinned to scene 1. I can switch over to my second window, and that could be a different application. So I have this app controlled, this Ecamm Live controlled switching between two different scenes. So you have one window, I can say that that is set to Code Insiders. My second window is set to Microsoft Edge, and I can actually switch that live. So instead of switching between scenes, if I was, say, broadcasting this or I'm recording this, I can go and select a particular tab, and that kind of switches out my viewport, even if this is not visible on my screen. And that's another aspect of Ecamm Live, is that you can have a long-running process. Let's say on our first screen here, we have a long-running process, and you want to see all of the output from that process. Maybe you're going to speed it up, maybe you're going to cut some of it out, but then you do want that to be there, but then you want to prepare the next stage of the demo, or maybe you just want to do some work in the background while this is going on. You don't have to worry about what's on your screen. This could be in the background to your actual work that you're working on alongside this. It could be a 15-minute process that's kicked off, and you get to kind of pin to the particular window that you want to. And then when you can switch to an active window using let's say the browser. So I'm going over here, and you can't see this, but I'm switching over to a browser, or the people who are seeing the recording or the people who are receiving a live stream of this cannot see this, and I'm going and I'm finding the particular browser that I'm wanting to work with, and then I can say, oh, right now I'm going to take my scene 1, and I'm going to switch that to current application. That will follow me around for a while, and then I can click in my dock on my other window, on even my primary monitor, and I can say, oh, now I'm switching to that application. Now I switch to Microsoft Edge. Now, if you have multiple windows and one of your windows is maybe on another monitor, you can actually pop or a different application that could be on another monitor. I'm sitting here doing this on a single MacBook Pro Retina display on my MacBook Pro, and you can see Ecamm Live here, and you can see the applications that I'm working with. And that's another reason to have the windows slightly smaller, is that you can switch between your control here, and you can switch between the windows that you're working with very, very easily. But let's say you have something on another monitor that you want to pull in. Usually what people have to do is drag stuff over into the monitor that they're sharing if they're sharing the full screen. In this case, I can just select the application, or I could click into it on the other one, but let's say I want to pull in Ulysses, which is on my large 27-inch 4K monitor. I have right sized this ahead of time, so I know that it's going to be the right size, but you can see that I have Ulysses on this other window, and I can be working between those two things. So this is a very smooth workflow. I go back here, I can say perhaps my home application is VS Code, and then I can go back and I'm still editing Ulysses. And you didn't see that on my primary monitor. That's actually way out of the way. So even if I was recording full screen, you could be sharing something here. The other option we have inside of Ecamm Live is to remove all of the controls. So we have the ability to output to something called a sharing window. If we click on output and we look at sharing window, and that is on, and that will appear inside of video call applications or screen sharing applications, such as StreamYard and all of that sort of thing. So that's quite useful. There's also the virtual cam capability, but in this case we're just sharing one window. But imagine if we just temporarily were using this on-screen display to pull in something and get it to this particular size. You could just hide all of the controls. You could say, well, my external application is going to be Ulysses, and I'm just going to hide all of the controls, and it looks like that window is on my screen. Not only that, I can control the zoom of how it looks in the context of other things. So if I make that window smaller, the zoom increases and it becomes easier to read. And this is important in presentations, both in person and online. If people are viewing something on a smaller device, they're going to want to be able to see that text nice and large there. So I've recorded all of these things via ScreenFlow. As you can see here, I'm going to actually pop ScreenFlow. This is what it looks like on my 4K monitor. So as you can see, the proportions aren't quite right. We have a black bars above and below. That's what it looks like on a 4K monitor because I have a dock at the bottom. A few other things are here. The zoom isn't quite right. If I was showing you little controls and other things here and there, that would be a problem. But if I was to zoom that in for us, you can see that it ends up being much more readable, and people end up being able to focus on what really matters. So sometimes we do use ScreenFlow to record things. It generates quite large files, especially with the Retina resolution. But in this case with Ecamm Live, I get to record directly to 1080p MP4 files. You can always fail over, and you can not necessarily fail over, but you can always switch over and say, yes, I do want to show an entire primary display. But often that's not the case, because I end up having to cut out my taskbar. I'll end up having to cut out the dock or hide different things. In this case, we enable people to focus on exactly what we want to focus on, and we have a lot of control just with this app switching capability, which is very dynamic. There are window switches inside of other applications like OBS, but it doesn't have that seamless, fluid movement between different applications. You'd have to set up, typically from what I've seen, you would have to set up scenes and say, in this scene I have this application, in this other scene I have this application, and it doesn't give you that kind of dynamic aspect. One of the final tips I'll show you here is we mentioned that we can have multiple windows, and if they're not on top of each other, it won't zoom to the window correctly. If we have multiple overlapping windows, or let's say I have on another window, I have a large version of this application, and it will actually put them side by side for me. So this is my primary monitor on my MacBook here, but if I drag this Microsoft Edge window over, you can see them. You're actually seeing two windows at that point. Well, if I'm just doing that to set up, I have two options. I can say I do want to use that one browser, and it's going to zoom in and it's going to use that browser tab. Or if I'm using current application for any moment in time, I could have pivoted over to my VS Code temporarily while I'm editing. I have this giant thing where I might be looking at docs on my 4K monitor, and I can just, to give you some sense of comparison, this is what they both look like. And if I don't want that anymore, I can just minimize that second application, and that gets the zoom right on the right hand side. The other setting that's important to have running here is called Zoom to App Windows. If you don't zoom to App Windows, it will do this, and that might be totally fine, especially if you have something like we pop a VS Code window as well. We move these around. They'll be shown relative to the screen, but it'll only show the current application. It won't show your background here. As you can see, even if we have even if we're recording an entire window here, we can say my secondary display, which is my laptop display here, you cannot see Ecamm Live and its controls on top of all of this. You do see it in the top bar here, which you can see from the menu. You can't see the menu dropping down, and that's a setting inside of Ecamm Live that you can say, Ecamm Live and its controls won't appear, even if I'm sharing an entire display. So I have a lot of control. I can rest assured that nothing inside of Ecamm, all of my behind the scenes producing, etc., is going to be impacted. And that's the same even if it's current application. It doesn't show that I'm working with Ecamm. Typically, just to wrap up, we will want to zoom to app windows, and you'll be able to see only the app window that you care about there. So thank you very much. This has been a lot of fun. I hope this is useful to a number of people, and thank you for watching this, and look forward to hearing any other alternatives you might have. If you know of any workflows, if you have a favorite workflow, particularly using open source and cross-platform tools like OBS, or if you're using other things like ScreenFlow, please feel free, or DaVinci Resolve, which is typically where we do most of our editing, please feel free to share these, and I look forward to hearing more. Thank you.